Salutations! Today we're doing another WorldSwap video continuing the Tinkerbell and Winx Club series. The two lovely ladies I'm redesigning today are Flora and Rosetta. Alright, so first up is Flora, who naturally is a garden fairy in this AU. You'll probably notice that I didn't change much about her outfit concept, mostly because I had a hard time coming up with something different, especially since it translated so well into the Tinkerbell clothing style. I did, however, connect the sleeves to the dress and made them shorter, and I added petal detailing to make it look as if her dress were actually made of real flower petals. You know, like I did for Musa. I noticed that many of the fairies in Tinkerbell actually have colored tint to their wings, so I added a green tint to Flora's. You'll be able to see those, the tints that I'm talking about if you look at, like, pictures of the Tinkerbell girls against a white background. It's easier to see. It's harder to see when you're watching the movies, but it's there, I promise. Now, Flora is often the first to help any new garden fairies in Pixie Hollow, taking it upon herself to mentor them in how to use their talents and in how life works in Pixie Hollow. She loves supporting and encouraging other fairies and is known to be gentle, firm, and honest when speaking to others. She spends what time she isn't doing her garden fairy work tending to her own garden at home or hanging out with the girls. She, Stella, and Aisha, or Layla, whichever name you use, have a weekly spa day where they go for wing washing and massages. Rosetta's design, at least for the skirt of her dress, is low-key inspired by Alina from Fairytopia. As for the top of her dress, I wanted to keep the shape language consistent, so I just repeated the ruffled petal-like tears I used for the skirt. As for her hair, I turned the large, sweeping curls in her original design into rose-shaped buns on either side of her head. Her large curls throughout the rest of her hair translated really well into the dramatic Enchantix hairstyle, so I just kept the general shape and just lengthened it a little more. Her wings are also petal-shaped with seafoam green accents. Last but not least, I shaped her pixie dust vial to resemble a tulip. Like with Vidya and Tinkerbell, I'm giving Rosetta's Enchantix transformation a backstory. Rosetta is from Botanithia, a vibrant, lush world with gentle, aromatic winds. The breezes of Botanithia are constant, flowing and intersecting like rivers, and are often used for travel for people and seeds alike. After the ordeal on Zinnia, Tinkerbell's home planet, the girls reconvene at Althea College to try and discover the identities of the three thieves. After a week or so of dead ends, classes, and rising tensions, Rosetta suggests that they do something over the weekend to help take their minds off things and reset. She mentions having planned a trip to home, and so asks the other girls to join her on her visit. They all agree, and the next day, they head off to Botanithia. Upon arriving, Rosetta gives the girls a tour, showing them her favorite spa as well as the turbine, which sits in the midst of where all the breezes converge, just outside the city. The building is the tallest structure for miles, a recognizable landmark, as well as the main hub for breeze boats. It is both a windmill and a lighthouse. As the sun sets, Rosetta and the girls take one of these breeze boats on a leisurely ride to their last destination for the day. Back in the city, the girls find themselves led to a massive library simply known as the Garden. It has the biggest collection of tomes and magic spells in the magic dimension. It is also home to the Vault of the Dark Arts, a secured crypt for the darkest of spells and incantations. As the girls pass the vault, Iridessa makes a comment on the many, many guards that patrol the area. Rosetta responds with an explanation of how they're mainly for show, and try to scare off any potential thieves and poachers, though she finds the show a bit of an overkill, considering no one has attempted to break into the crypt in many, many years. The next morning, the girls awaken slowly, stumbling from their beds, slightly nauseated and dizzy. Rosetta is the first up, sensing something wrong. The air, stale and heavy, was a pungent, acrid scent that coated her mouth. She pushed open the door to her balcony, trying to air out the room, but she coughed, holding her hand to her nose. The smell was stronger outside. The guards that normally patrolled the streets leaned against buildings and poles, paling as they gripped their stomachs. A few lay in curled heaps on the ground. Rosetta closed her windows again and made her way to the door, nearly collapsing as another wave of nausea hit her. She opened the door to find Iridessa on the other side. Behind her were Tinkerbell and Silvermist. All three girls were transformed. "Quick, transform!" Iridessa urged, reaching to steady Rosetta as she nearly collapsed again. The flash of strength and power that filled Rosetta as she transformed seemed to burn away most of the sickness's effects, though she could still feel it weighing on her, and she sensed something else. It was a spell. Someone or something was casting a spell, one so powerful that it encompassed the entire city. The four girls rushed to gather the others, and together they casted a tracking spell. Through the enchantment, the girls found themselves drawn to the hills just outside the city. To the turbine. Across the city, the six fairies flew, Vidya shielding the group with a bubble of wind to protect them from the effects of the curse, which grew stronger the closer they got to the turbine. When they arrived, they found the tower covered in thick, blackened vines. They landed close to the overgrown doorway, Iridessa summoning a ray of light to try and slice through the wall of vines, which was promptly absorbed by the enchanted tendrils. The girls stood in a shocked silence. How are we going to get through? Silvermist whispered, sending the girls into a frantic discussion. As her friends argued, Rosetta stepped up to the edge of the protective field of Vidya's spell and set her hands against the vines. Immediately, she felt her energy begin to drain away. Gritting her teeth, she gripped the vines and pulled, pleadingly. She willed them to let her through. She was starting to feel cold, her friends' voices growing distant. Then something caved. Her power broke through, connecting with something deep within the vines. She fell forward as the vines split apart, closing behind her as she tumbled through. Rosetta lay on the tiles a moment, shaking, catching her breath. The full force of the curse seemed to be trying to crush her, hungry and oppressing. The light from her fairy form flickered as she pushed herself to her feet, bracing herself against the railing as she climbed the winding staircase to the top of the turbine. Two bodies greeted her as she reached the top floor, a pair of unconscious guards, their bodies being overrun by the dark, leeching vines. She knelt beside one, pressing her hand against the side of his face. He was still breathing, but he was cold and getting paler by the second. Rosetta followed the vines to an object sitting on the floor. It was an intricately carved wooden box, a purple, glowing flower sprouting up from its center, the roots spilling out to form the vines that choked the building. As she neared, tendrils exploded from the flower, thrashing as they attempted to ensnare her. Rosetta ducked, then dove forward to grab the box. The moment she touched it, her fairy form flickered again, and she could feel the power slipping from her life force being siphoned away. She fumbled with the lid of the box, hands shaking as the chill from before returned. She fought with it, ignoring the vines whipping at her. Her ears began to ring as the world around her began to fade. Her body felt numb, and the world went black. Then she took one last gasp, then something burst to life within her. Power bloomed from her core, and in a brilliant flash of light, Rosetta felt herself return with renewed strength. The flower seemed to scream as she shoved the lid closed, cutting off the vines. The box locked with a satisfying peak. Outside, Iridessa, Silvermist, Tinkerbell, Vidya, and Fawn worked desperately to find a way into the turbine. Then, a flash of light erupted from the tower, the vines evaporating in a wave. From the docks overhead, Rosetta descended, holding a carved wooden box and sporting her newly acquired enchantix. A group hug ensued. And now you may meet Rosetta, the fairy of gardens and guardian of Botanithia. I think my favoritism for these two kind of shone through while I was drawing them. They're a little more rendered than the others, but I had fun, and I can't promise this style for all my world swaps. I just had a particularly strong burst of inspiration for these two. And if you happen to have any thoughts on my art, or writing, or anything else for this video, leave a comment down below. And if you got this far, slap a flower in your comment too. And don't forget to like, subscribe, YouTube things, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye!